The stars outside the ship called Sojourner did not twinkle. They were fixed points of cold, hard light in a blackness so deep it felt solid. Inside the ship, the air always carried a faint smell. It was the smell of old metal, recycled water, and the quiet, desperate sweat of people working very hard. Captain Minsuk stood on the command deck. He was a thin man, and his uniform, once blue, was now faded and patched at the elbow. He looked at the main screen. For 50 years, the screen had shown only empty space ahead. Now it showed something else. A ship.it was not like their ship. The Sojourner was boxy and ugly, made from scraps and hope. The other ship was smooth. It looked like it was grown, not built. It was shaped like a long, dark seed, and it moved without any fire or noise. It had simply appeared beside them. A message had come in perfect, simple English. Prepare for docking and inspection. A representative of the Draconian sovereignty will board. No one knew what the Draconian sovereignty was, but they knew it was powerful. The word inspection made Minsuk's stomach feel cold. Are they here to help us? Asked a young crewman, his voice tight with hope. Minsuk did not answer. He had stopped believing in help a long time ago. He believed in problems, and this was a new one. Sound the all clear, he said, his voice rough. No alarms. I want everyone in clean uniforms at docking bay 3. No weapons. Just stand straight. Down in the living sections, the alert lights blinked a soft, calm blue. This was the visitor signal, a thing they had practiced but never thought would happen. In a small family room, a woman named Su Min heard the soft chime. She was cutting a green leafy plant in a small tray under a dim light. Her hands, thin and careful, stopped moving. Her son, Junsu, looked up from his drawing on the floor. Who is coming, Mom? He asked. I don't know, Junsu, she said. She tried to smile. Maybe someone important. You must be very quiet and good. Is it someone from Earth? His eyes were big. Earth was just a story to him. A beautiful story about a place with too much food and a bright yellow sun you could feel on your skin. No, my love. From somewhere else. She pulled him close and straightened his shirt. It was too big for him. All his clothes were too big, handed down from older children who were now grown. She looked into his face, at his dark, clever eyes. He was so small. She felt a familiar ache, a hollow feeling that was not just in her stomach. It was the fear that she could not keep him safe. In the docking bay, the crew stood in 2 lines. They were all thin. Their uniforms hung on them. The bay was cold, and the big door that led to space was sealed shut. Captain Minsuk stood at the front. He could hear the nervous breathing of his people. Then, a green light shone above the door. A low hum filled the room. The big door did not open. Instead, the center of it began to change. The metal became soft and silvery, like liquid. Then, without a sound, a hole opened in the middle of it. The edges of the hole were smooth and perfect. No cutting, no welding. It was as if the door had simply decided to let something in from the hole. A shape entered. First came a long, graceful neck, covered in scales the color of old, polished bronze. Then a powerful body, wider than 2 men, followed by a tail that slid silently onto the deck. It was a dragon, but not from a storybook. This dragon stood on 2 strong legs. It had 2 smaller arms tucked close to its chest. Its wings were folded tight against its back like a cloak. Its eyes were large, golden, and slitted like a cat's. They took in the room, the people, the rust spots on the walls, in one slow, sweeping look. The air seemed to get heavier. The dragon had to lower its head so it did not touch the ceiling. It smelled of ozone and something else, something warm and strange, like stone warmed by a sun. Captain Minsuk took a small step forward. His heart was beating very fast. Welcome, he said, the word dry in his mouth. I am Captain Minsuk of the Generation ship Sojourner. We are travelers. The dragon's head turned, the golden eyes fixed on Minsuk. When it spoke, its voice was deep. It vibrated in Minsuk's bones. I am Envoy Kadar, of the Draconian sovereignty. Your vessel entered monitored space. This is a routine survey. We assess migratory species. Migratory species. Like birds. Like insects. We mean no trouble, Minsuk said. We are only looking for a home. Our world is gone. Kadar made a low sound, not quite a grunt. It was a sound of acknowledgement, not of sympathy. All living things seek territory. Your method is crude, but persistent. I will observe your systems and your biological status. You will show me. It was not a request. The envoy took a step forward. Its claws, each one as long as a man's hand, made a soft click on the metal floor. The crew shrank back, trying not to show their fear. The envoy was here to look at them, to look at their empty storage rooms and their struggling engines and their tired, hungry faces. Minsuk felt a deep shame. This was not how he had wanted to meet another species. Not as a beggar. Of course, Minsuk said, bowing his head slightly. We will show you what we have. Envoy Kadar gave a slow blink, his great head turning to look down the long, dimly lit corridor of the human ship. He was ready to begin his inspection. He did not see a people. He saw a problem of survival, a curious case study in the void. The true state of the sojourner, and the small, fierce love that held it together, was still hidden from him, waiting in a small room where a mother had just given her son the bigger piece of bread. Captain Minsuk walked just ahead of Envoy Kadar. The dragon envoy moved through the human ship's corridors with a slow, careful grace. He had to turn his shoulders slightly to fit. His long tail dragged behind him, not scraping, but making a soft, whispering sound on the floor. The tour began with the engine room. Minsuk spoke with a voice he tried to keep strong and proud. These are our fusion drives. They have been running for 54 years with only minor maintenance. Kadar looked at the massive old machinery. Pipes and conduits were wrapped with fresh tape in places. Warning labels were faded. A young engineer, a woman named Jiun, stood nervously by a monitor. Kadar's golden eyes scanned the room. He saw the ingenuity, the patches, the sheer stubbornness that kept the ancient systems going. He also saw the terrible inefficiency. Heat bled from a dozen seams. The energy output was pitifully low by his standards. Your energy conversion rate is below 20%, Kadar stated, his voice a low rumble in the hot room. The waste heat alone would power a small city on a sovereignty world. Curious design. Prioritizes longevity over power. Minsuk felt his face grow warm. It was not a compliment. Longevity was the only priority, Envoy. The goal was to keep moving. Indeed, was all Kadar said. The word held no feeling. Next was the hydroponic sector. Here, the air was wet and smelled of damp earth and green things. Long rows of trays were stacked under bright, artificial lights. But the plants were thin. The leaves were pale, not a deep green. The stalks looked fragile. Suman worked here. Minsuk saw her at the far end of an aisle, her back to them. She was carefully trimming dead leaves from a spinach plant. She did not turn around. Minsuk was glad. He did not want the envoy to see the deep tiredness in her eyes. Kadar stopped by a tray of struggling wheatgrass. He bent his great head down, his nostrils flaring slightly. The light spectrum is incorrect, he observed. The nutrient solution is lacking in 3 essential compounds. Your yield is approximately 15% of optimal for this space. Minsuk nodded. We know. Our original nutrient stocks were lost in an accident 20 years ago. We make do with what we can recycle. Making do, Kadar repeated, as if tasting the phrase. He looked at the thin plants. This level of biomass cannot support your listed crew complement. You are in a caloric deficit. It was a statement of fact. A cold, clinical diagnosis. Minsuk wanted to argue, to say they were managing, but he just nodded again. The truth was a heavy stone in his stomach. The envoy saw the water reclamation plant, a noisy jungle of pipes where every drop of sweat, every bit of moisture from breath, was captured, cleaned, and used again. He saw the recycling furnaces where plastic and waste were melted down to make new tools or patch hull breaches. Everywhere, Kadar saw the same story. He saw humans using every trick, every bit of knowledge to survive. He saw clever fixes and stubborn work. But through his eyes it was all so small, so desperate. It was like watching an insect build a very complicated nest out of mud and spit. He felt a distant sort of respect, the kind one might have for a rock that stubbornly refuses to erode. But it was not admiration. It was analysis. They passed the living quarters. Doors were open. Inside, families were trying to look normal. Children sat on floors, playing with simple blocks made from scrap plastic. Adults mended clothes. They all looked up as the huge bronze shape passed by. The children stared, eyes wide with wonder and fear. The adults looked down quickly, ashamed of their poverty, of their patched blankets and empty shelves. Kadar noted their body masses, the slight hollows in their cheeks, the careful, energy-saving movements. His internal sensors recorded it all. Species, human. Status, borderline starvation. Technology level, preconsolidation. Threat index, negligible. Survival probability, declining. Finally, Minsuk led him to the ship's main data core. It was a cold, quiet room full of blinking lights and old servers. "This holds our history," Minsuk said, his voice softer now. "Our science, our art, everything from Earth." Kadar stood in the doorway, too large to enter. He peered in. "A digital archive. We have scanned its broad-spectrum transmissions. Your history is one of conflict and resource exhaustion, a common pattern for emergent species." Minsuk felt a flash of anger. This creature, from its perfect ship, dismissed all of human joy and pain as a common pattern. He bit his tongue. He could not afford anger. "The pattern you see," Minsuk said carefully, "is that we are still here. After the conflict, after the loss, we built this. We are still going." Kadar turned his great head to look down at the captain. For a long moment he was silent. The golden eyes were impossible to read. "That is the most interesting data point of all, Captain," Kadar said. "Your persistence. It is illogical. Your probability of failure has been absolute for over a decade, based on my models. And yet you persist. I will continue my observations." The tour was over. Kadar had seen their weakness, their poverty, their struggle. He had categorized it and filed it away. As he followed Minsuk back toward the central corridor, he believed he understood the Sojourner and its people completely. He saw a dying tribe on a dying ship. He did not see the love that held them together. He did not see the quiet sacrifices happening in small rooms. He had observed the engine, but not the heart. And so, he missed the most important thing of all. The door to their family room slid shut with a soft sigh, sealing out the strange, heavy silence that had filled the ship since the dragon's arrival. Inside, the air felt lighter, but the worry remained. Sumin let out a breath she didn't know she'd been holding. Junsu stood in the middle of the small space, looking up at her. "He was so big, Mom," Junsu whispered, his eyes wide. "Was he scary?" Sumin knelt in front of him. Her knees popped, a small sound in the quiet room. She took his small hands in hers. They were cold. "He is different," she said, choosing her words with care. "But we must be polite. He is a guest." "Captain Minsuk looked scared," Junsu said. "The captain has a big job. He is carrying a heavy weight for all of us." She smiled and brushed his hair from his forehead. "Your job is to be my good, strong boy. Okay?" "Okay," he said, nodding seriously. Her stomach chose that moment to make a low, empty sound. It was not loud, but in the quiet room it was obvious. Junsu's eyes dropped to her middle. "You're hungry," he stated. "I'm fine," Sumin said quickly, standing up. She turned to the small shelf that served as their kitchen. "It's time for your dinner." She took out a single wrapped bar from a locked cabinet. It was a nutrient bar, dense and brown. It was not good, but it kept you alive. It was their last one for today. The ration system was strict. Every calorie was counted. She unwrapped it carefully, saving the wrapper to be processed later into glue or patching material. The bar sat on a small plate. She picked up the dull knife. "I'll divide it," she said. Junsu watched her hands. She measured the bar with her eyes. She cut it. One piece was much larger. The other was a small, sad sliver. She put the large piece on a second plate and handed it to Junsu. Here you go. Eat it slowly. Make it last. Junsu took the plate. He looked at it. Then he looked at the small piece left on the first plate. That's yours? He asked. Yes, Sumin said. She picked up the small piece. See? Plenty for me. I actually had a little extra from my shift in hydroponics. A bit of raw greens. Very filling. The lie came easily. It was a lie she told every day. Junsu frowned. He was a smart boy. He noticed things. He noticed that his mother's clothes were getting looser. He noticed that she moved more slowly in the mornings. He heard the sounds her stomach made at night when she thought he was asleep. You should have more, he said, holding his plate out to her. You work harder. Her heart cracked a little. She pushed his plate gently back toward him. A mother's work is different. It doesn't need as much fuel. Now eat. I need to check the root nodes on the asparagus ferns before lights out. She took a tiny bite of her own small piece. She made a show of chewing it thoroughly, of savoring it. Good. Junsu sat down at their small table. He began to eat his bar. He did eat slowly, tearing off tiny bits, making it last as long as he could. He watched his mother as she moved around their room. She picked up his drawing from earlier, a picture of a big green planet with a smiling sun. She smoothed it out and smiled at him. But her hand was shaking, just a little tremor. When he finished his food, the hollow feeling in his own stomach was only partly filled. He knew his mother's was still empty. Done? She asked. Her voice was bright, too bright. Good. Time for the learning module. Today is about Earth's oceans. You love the whale songs. She guided him to the small screen on the wall. She tapped it, and it glowed to life, showing a deep blue sea. The sound of watery, echoing calls filled the room. You watch this. I'm just gonna lie down for a few minutes. My head aches a little. She kissed the top of his head. Her lips felt dry. She went to her narrow bed on the other side of the room. She lay down on her side, facing the wall. She pulled a thin blanket over her shoulders. Junsu watched the screen, but he listened to his mother. Her breathing was slow and deep, but he could tell she wasn't sleeping. She was just lying there, very still, saving energy. The whale songs were beautiful and sad. They made him think of huge, dark spaces. He looked from the screen of the vast, watery earth to his mother's still form. She was shrinking, he thought. Every day, a little bit smaller. He didn't understand the big problems of the ship or the Dragon Envoy. He understood that his mom was hungry. He understood that she gave her food to him. He understood that the big, powerful visitor might have food. The logic in his young mind was simple and clear. If you are big and strong, you have extra. If someone you love is hungry, you ask for help. The whale song echoed. His mother didn't move. Junsu made a decision. He waited a few more minutes, until her breathing seemed deeper. Then, as quietly as a shadow, he slipped off his chair. He didn't turn off the learning module. He left the whale songs playing for her. He padded to the door. It slid open silently for him. He took one last look at his mother's back, a small curve under the gray blanket. Then he stepped out into the corridor, on a mission to find the giant bronze visitor and ask him a very important question. The corridor outside his room was empty and quiet. The usual hum of the ship felt different, like it was holding its breath. Junsu walked on the balls of his feet, his soft shoes making no sound on the cool metal floor. He knew the ship well. He knew which corridors led to the busy places like the hydroponics decks or the schoolrooms. He also knew which ones were usually empty. He walked toward the central spine, the big main hallway that ran the length of the ship. That was where important things happened. That was where the big visitor would be. He heard voices before he saw anyone. It was Captain Minsuk's voice, strained and polite, and then the deep, rumbling answer of the Dragon Envoy. They were coming his way. Junsu ducked behind a large pipe that ran along the wall. He peeked out. There they were, Captain Minsuk, looking even thinner and more tired under the bright lights, was walking backwards, trying to talk and lead at the same time. And behind him, filling the entire corridor, was Envoy Kadar. Up close, he was even bigger. His bronze scales shimmered like oil on water. Each step was slow and heavy, a soft clink of claw on metal. His long tail swayed gently behind him. The envoy was speaking. Your structural integrity is compromised in sections 7 through 9. The patching is inadequate for sustained travel. We reinforce it every cycle, Captain Minsuk said, his voice tight. Our fabricators are limited, but we manage. Managing is not thriving, Captain. It is a slower form of decay. Junsu didn't understand all the words, but he understood the feeling. The big dragon was saying their ship was broken. The captain sounded sad and defensive. Junsu felt a small spark of anger. This was his home. It wasn't broken. It was just tired, like his mom. He waited. The group passed his pipe. He could smell the envoy now. A warm, dry smell, like a rock baked in the sun, mixed with something sharp and clean. It wasn't a bad smell, just very strong. He slipped out from behind the pipe and began to follow them. He was so small, and they were so focused on each other, that no one noticed him. He was like a little mouse trailing behind two giants. They walked past the entrance to the garden decks. They walked past the closed doors of the workshops. The envoy's great head turned left and right, his golden eyes missing nothing. He saw every crack, every stain, every sign of wear. Junsu kept following. His heart was beating fast in his chest. He wanted to run up and ask his question right away, but something told him to wait. The adults were in the middle of talking. He had been taught not to interrupt. Finally, they stopped near a big viewport. The stars were scattered outside like grains of salt on black paper. The envoy looked out, his massive form blocking the light. Your course is aimless, Kadar observed. You are hoping, not navigating. Captain Minsuk's shoulders slumped. Hope is all we have left, envoy. For a long moment, there was only silence. Junsu saw his chance. This was a pause. He could ask now. He took a deep breath. He stepped out from the shadow of a support beam. He walked forward, right into the middle of the open space between the captain and the dragon. The crew members who were following at a distance froze, their eyes wide. Junsu didn't look at them. He looked up and up at the giant bronze back of Envoy Kadar. The dragon's scales were like a wall. He was so close he could see the fine patterns on them, like fingerprints. He was not scared. He was on a mission. He reached out one small hand. His fingers touched the envoy's hind leg, just above the ankle. The scale was smooth and surprisingly warm, like a stone left in a sunny spot. It was hard, like metal. He tugged. It was like tugging on a mountain. First, nothing happened. Then the great leg shifted. The massive, wedge-shaped head turned. One huge, golden eye, larger than Junsu's whole face, looked down. The eye was not angry. It was curious. It blinked slowly, a clear inner eyelid sliding sideways. Captain Minsuk made a choking sound. Junsu! No! Step back! But Junsu didn't step back. He held his ground, his small hand still resting on the warm scale. He looked directly into that golden eye. Envoy Kadar lowered his head. He brought it down to the level of the boy, his long neck curling. His breath washed over Junsu, warm and smelling of that strange, clean ozone smell. The voice, when it came, was softer than before, but it still vibrated in Junsu's bones. Little human, you are far from your designated area. Junsu swallowed. His mouth felt dry. He thought of his mother, lying on her bed, her stomach empty. He thought of the small piece of food on her plate. He remembered the sound of her hungry stomach in the quiet night. He gathered all his courage. He looked into the eye of the dragon, and he asked. Junsu's voice did not shake. It was clear and high, a small bell in the silent corridor. Great Envoy, he began, repeating the title he had heard the captain use. He paused for a second, making sure his words were right. Mom didn't eat her share again. The words hung in the air. Captain Minsuk stared, his face pale. He took a half step forward, but the Envoy's smallest claw twitched, a tiny motion that told him to stay where he was. The crew behind him were statues. Junsu continued, his brow furrowed with the seriousness of his task. She says she's not hungry, but her stomach talks at night. It makes noises, grumbling noises. He imitated the low, empty sound as best he could. It was a small, pathetic noise that he looked up, his dark eyes earnest, pleading for understanding. I eat my share, but she gives me most of it. Hers is too small. He held up his thumb and finger close together to show just how small. Then he gestured with his whole small arm toward the massive dragon. You are big, so big. You must have lots of food on your big ship. He said it as simple fact. A big creature needed lots of food. It made sense. Do you have any old food? He searched for the right idea. Maybe something you don't need? Something that's left over? The concept of limitless abundance did not exist for him. Everything was precious, nothing was wasted. So the only thing a rich person might have was something they didn't want anymore. Just a little, he whispered, his voice softening. The confidence faded for a moment, replaced by a child's fear of asking for too much. Just a little, for Mom? So her stomach can be quiet. He finished. He stood there, his hand now at his side, waiting. He had said his piece. He had explained the problem and offered a solution. Now it was the adult's turn to answer. The silence that followed was absolute. The ever-present hum of the Sojourner's systems seemed to fade away. No one breathed. Captain Minsuk felt a cold horror spread through him. This was the end. Their shame, their most private and painful struggle, was now laid bare not as a ship-wide crisis, but as a single, damning story of a starving mother. It was worse than showing broken engines. This was a failure of the soul. He expected the envoy to be disgusted. He expected a cold remark about inefficient social structures or weak leadership. He expected the offer of alliance, if there ever was one, to vanish like smoke. The crew members looked at the floor, their faces burning with a shared humiliation. But Envoy Kadar did not move. He did not speak. His great, golden eye remained fixed on the small human boy. The sophisticated sensors behind that eye were not scanning for structural flaws or energy readings now. They were focused on the boy's face. They analyzed the micro-expressions. The genuine worry in the tightened brows, the hope in the slightly parted lips, the absence of any deceit. They measured the boy's slight frame, the subtle signs of mild, chronic malnutrition that matched his story. Inside Kadar's ancient, complex mind, a recalibration was occurring. All his previous assessments, migratory, resource deficient, declining probability, began to blink, an error signal in his logic stream. This was not a request for the species. This was not a captain negotiating for his crew. This was a single, small unit of the tribe acting alone. The motivation was not survival of the group. It was love for a specific other. The child was not begging for himself. He was begging for his mother. He was offering his own security by drawing the attention of a powerful unknown to ease her suffering. The draconian concept of strength was about power, scale, energy dominance, and longevity. A strong being took what it needed. A strong being had no wants. This was different. This was a different kind of power. A power that persisted in the dark, that gave itself away, that made a small boy walk up to a dragon and tug on its leg. Kadar had seen their failing technology. He had seen their empty gardens. He had seen their tired faces. But he had not seen them. Not until this moment. He had missed the flame because he was looking for a bonfire. This was a single, steady candle, burning itself down to keep another lit. The great eye blinked slowly. The low rumble that came from the dragon's chest was not a growl. It was something else. A deep, thoughtful vibration. Everyone waited for the sky to fall. The deep rumble from Envoy Kadar's chest faded into a profound silence. He did not look at Captain Minsuk. His entire focus was on the boy. Junsu stood perfectly still, his small face upturned, waiting for an answer. Then, Kadar moved. He did not rise. He lowered his great head even further, until his jaw rested lightly on the deck. He was now eye to eye with Junsu in a way that felt less towering, more deliberate. His voice, when he finally spoke, was different. The vibration was still there, but the tone was softer. It was the difference between distant thunder and a stone rolling gently down a hill. "Little one," Kadar began. The words were slow, chosen with a new care. "My people have a saying, a very old saying." He paused, his golden eye watching Junsu's reaction. "It is this: the oldest fire is not the hottest, but it gives the most lasting warmth." Junsu blinked, trying to understand. Fire? Warmth? He thought of the ship's heating system, which was often too cold. Kadar continued, his voice a low, warm murmur. "We have watched your ship. We measured its engines, its hull, its food supplies. We saw a weak fire." Odoyingember. He shifted his gaze, just for a second, to take in the stunned faces of Captain Minsuk and the crew. There was no accusation in the look now. It was an acknowledgement. His eye returned to Junsu. "But you showed me a different flame. You showed me the fire that burns here." One massive, claw-tipped finger lifted, not to point, but to gesture gently toward Junsu's own small chest. "A fire that feeds another, even when it has little fuel for itself. This is the old fire, the lasting fire." He let the words settle. The confusion in the corridor began to shift. The crew's shameful posture straightened, just a little. Captain Minsuk's breath caught. He was listening not as a desperate captain, but as a man hearing a truth he had forgotten. "We misunderstood your flame," Kadar said, and the admission was monumental. It was not an apology. It was a correction of a vast, ancient error in judgment. "We assessed the container and called the water dry." Then the envoy moved again. He lifted his head and turned his formidable gaze to Captain Minsuk. The captain flinched, bracing for a final, devastating judgment. "Captain," Kadar's voice regained some of its formal power, but the edge of disdain was gone. "The assessment is concluded." Minsuk's heart sank. This was it. They were to be left adrift. But Kadar was not finished. "Prepare your cargo bays. All of them." Minsuk stared. I beg your pardon, envoy?" "Your cargo bays," Kadar repeated, as if speaking to someone slow. "You will need space. My ship will transfer supplies. Protein synthesizers, high-yield aeroponic cultivators, hull patch polymer and the applicator drones to use it, and nutrient paste. A great deal of nutrient paste." The words were so impossible they seemed to suck the air from the corridor. Protein synthesizers? Cultivators? These were mythical things dreamt of in their engineering meetings. The crew began to murmur, a sound of pure, disbelieving shock. Kadar looked back down at Junsu. "You asked for old food, little guardian. What my ship carries is not old. But it is food. It is called ambrosia-grade nutrient paste. One small bite, the size of your thumb, will give your mother all the strength she needs for a week. It will make her strong. It will quiet the sounds in her stomach." Junsu's eyes grew as wide as the viewports. "A whole week? From one bite?" "This is not sharing old food," Kadar rumbled, the warmth returning to his voice. "This is recognizing a new kind of nobility. We do not give you these things because you are weak." He looked around at all the humans now, his gaze lingering on each thin, hopeful face. "We give them because you are strong in a way we had forgotten to measure. You carry the old fire, and the sovereignty does not let such fires go out." For a moment no one moved. The words seemed to hang in the air, too big to be real. Captain Minsuk's mouth opened and closed, but no sound came out. The crew stood frozen, their faces a mixture of shock and dawning, fragile hope. Junsu understood first. The big dragon had said yes. He had said yes, and he had called him Little Guardian. A huge, wobbly smile broke across Junsu's face. Envoy Kadar saw the smile. It was a small, human expression, but to him, in that moment, it was more valuable than any data point. He slowly began to rise from the floor. His joints made soft, clicking sounds. When he was standing at his full height again, he looked down at Junsu. "Now," the envoy said, his voice a gentle rumble, "you will show me to your mother." It was not a request. It was an instruction, but it was kind. Junsu nodded eagerly. He turned and took a few steps, then stopped and looked back. He wasn't sure of the way. In his mission to find the envoy, he had gotten turned around. Captain Minsuk finally found his voice. "Deck 7, Section 2, he said, his words hoarse. "I can lead." "No," Kadar interrupted, his gaze still on the boy. "He will lead. The Guardian leads the way." Junsu understood. He felt a surge of importance. He pointed down the corridor the way he had come. "This way," he said with new confidence. And so the procession began. It was unlike anything the Sojourner had ever seen. At the front walked a small human boy in a too-big shirt. Behind him, with slow, careful steps, came the massive, bronze-scaled envoy of the Draconian sovereignty. And behind the envoy, at a respectful distance, came Captain Minsuk and a growing crowd of crew members, their whispers of awe filling the hallway. They moved through the ship's arteries. People peered out of doorways. Their eyes widened at the sight. They saw the envoy, not marching as a conqueror or looking around with cold analysis, but following a child. His great head was lowered, his attention on the small figure guiding him. Junsu walked quickly, his small legs taking 2 steps for every one of the envoys. He did not look back. He knew the dragon was there. He could feel the warm, clean smell and hear the soft click-clack of claws behind him. He turned a corner, then another, navigating the maze of his home with Shorty now. They reached the door to his family room. Junsu stopped. He looked up at the envoy, then at the door. "She's in here. She might be sleeping." Kadar gave a slow, single nod. "Then we will be quiet." Junsu pressed the panel. The door slid open with its usual soft sigh. The room was just as he had left it. The learning module on the wall still played the whale songs, the deep, lonely calls echoing in the small space. On the far side, under the thin gray blanket, his mother lay on her side, facing the wall. She did not stir. Junsu walked in. Kadar had to turn his shoulders and bend his neck to fit through the doorway. He filled the small room. His head nearly touched the ceiling. The warm, stone and ozone smell filled the space. Tsumin heard the door. She heard the footsteps, and then a different, heavier presence. She thought it was a crewman coming with a message. Slowly, tiredly, she pushed herself up on one elbow and turned. Her eyes saw Junsu first. Then they traveled upward, following the scale-covered legs, the powerful body, until they met the golden, slitted eyes of the dragon envoy, standing in the middle of her home. That a gasp caught in her throat. Fear, sharp and immediate, flashed across her face. She scrambled to sit up, pulling the blanket around her shoulders. "Junsu, come here," she whispered urgently, her voice tight with panic. "It's okay, Mom," Junsu said, rushing to her bedside. He took her shaking hand. "It's okay. He's here to help." Sumin looked from her son's earnest face to the immense, silent alien. Her mind could not make sense of it. Envoy Kadar dipped his head in a gesture that was almost a bow. "Sumin," he said, her name strange and solemn in his deep voice. "Your son is a brave guardian. He asked me for a gift for you. I have come to give it." He raised one clawed hand. Held gently between 2 talons was a small, metallic capsule, no bigger than Junsu's thumb. It shimmered with a soft, inner light. "This is ambrosia," Kadar said. "One bite. For you." Sumin stared at the capsule. She looked at Junsu, whose eyes were shining with pride and hope. She looked at the envoy, whose gaze held no pity, only a deep, respectful gravity. She understood then. She understood what her son had done. The fear melted away, replaced by a wave of emotion so strong it made her eyes burn. With a trembling hand, she reached out. Kadar placed the tiny capsule in her palm. It was warm. "Eat," he rumbled softly. She looked at Junsu. He nodded, his smile encouraging. She put the capsule to her lips. It dissolved instantly. A taste, not like food, but like vitality itself, like cool water and sunlight and strength, flooded her mouth. A warmth spread through her body, not a burning heat, but a deep, satisfying glow. The constant, gnawing ache in her stomach vanished. The tiredness in her bones seemed to lessen. She took a deep, full breath, and it felt like the first real breath she had taken in years. Not a single tear traced a path down her cheek. Not a tear of sadness, but of overwhelming relief. She pulled Junsu into a tight hug, burying her face in his hair. Over her son's shoulder, she looked at the dragon Envoy. "Thank you," she whispered, the words choked with feeling. Envoy Kadar gave another slow, deliberate nod. He had seen the old fire in the sun. Now he saw it rekindled in the mother. The assessment was truly complete, without another word. He turned, his scales whispering against the doorway, and left the room. He had a cargo transfer to oversee and a new entry to make in the Draconian records. Not about a failing ship, but about a species that carried a flame worth preserving. Outside, the work of salvation began, but inside the small room, something more important had already been saved.